starting. Brr, 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 brr. Hi, it's Monday morning. Hi, it's Monday morning. Woo! Here we go. Here we go. Monday morning. Monday. Whew, yeah, I'm starting at 9:30 today, my time. 9:30 my time because it's just, you know what? 9 just wasn't going to happen today. Also, you can see the hair. Yeah. Anyway, all good. And if you're following me on Facebook, the camera is set up such that my my fall decorative things are like just sticking up out of my head. It's amazing. Instagram doesn't look like that. Instagram, it looks like, oh look, fall decorative things on the side of her head. Facebook, I don't know, can I move it a little bit? I can do it a little bit. I don't know if that's better. It's on the side. I don't know. You're welcome. You're welcome. I do my best to decorate, to be like in it, and here we go. Still haven't fixed. I apologize. I still have not fixed that light balance thing on Facebook, or on my laptop. So, here we go. Oof. It's been a time. It's been a time. Okay, Monday. And I also just realized, look at that. No rings. What? It's fine. I'm fine. Here we are on Monday. All right, friends. Let's get this party started. So, it's Monday. These are live office hours. I am Dr. Shannon Coates, your host, Dr. Shannon Coates. And I am coming to you live from north of Toronto. And I totally don't have my land acknowledgement ready, so I apologize for that. But I acknowledge that I am not. I am on lands that traditionally do not belong to me. So, yes. Rather than talking politics today, or how pedagogy is politics, which is something that I kind of posted over the weekend to just kind of get it out there. Because if you're here on my page, whoa, hi, weirdness. If you're here on my page, and if you're following me, I just don't want it to be a surprise to you that we're going to talk about stuff. Just don't be surprised. But on Mondays, I like to sort of talk a little bit more about something that you can kind of take into the studio and apply. So some specific ways to kind of work in the studio. So that's what I'm doing because today is Monday. And so what I wanted to do was answer a question from something that was posted previously, and I'm just going to pull it up here so that I have the actual, yes. So I reposted something on Instagram and on Facebook called from Simply Teach Better. And this was about, okay, well, I'll just read it. It says, so did you know that research says consistently teaching lessons using the same structure and lesson design has a massive impact on student achievement? And then it goes on to say my own anecdotal evidence is that it has a massive impact on teacher well-being and work-life balance as well. So, and then there are some specific resources there and some research and basically outlining what we know to be true from classroom teaching. And I want to just say too, I did a whole post I reposted a whole thing from My Third Music about Western classical training and education, and a lot of folks in that post talking about, or a lot of comments, not a lot, there were a few comments about, shouldn't we be doing both? Shouldn't we have a more indigenous understanding incorporated into our Western classical training or into our Western education system? And it can't, with this sort of implication that it's a zero-sum game, that if we're teaching in this specific way, then we can't possibly also be incorporating things from this other way of teaching, right? And also, if we're teaching in this specific way, then like it does us no good to acknowledge where this system has come from. Oh, piano voice. I love it. Hi, Nicholas. So there's some of these like underlying implications that like, you know, it's like this zero-sum game in teaching, right? Where you're like, okay, well, if I'm doing it this way, then I can't possibly be doing it this way. And the way I'm doing it is fine. I don't have to acknowledge where this system has come from or the philosophies that are inherent in this system, right? Like, because I'm doing it fine. So like, but the point of those posts and the point of acknowledging where the system comes from is that we are influenced by the system we're in and by the system we were raised in and by the system we learned in, no matter what. Like, we are influenced by it. So the point of that post is not to say that you are doing it wrong. The point of that post is to say, let's figure out the spaces where we're not doing it as well as we could. Let's understand where this system comes from. Let's understand why we're doing some things the way we're doing them. And let's figure out how to do it better. Like, so when I'm talking about structure in specific lessons, this is structure in learning. This isn't necessarily to say we need to impose a Western educational system on our lessons, right? Like we have to take that on intensely, right? That isn't what I'm saying. What I'm saying is structure is research does show over and over again, research shows that structure or knowing what to expect next, what's coming next in the learning process, that goes a long way for our brains to actually grasp the information and do the thing. And there are some things that are inherent in these structures that are inherent in all great teaching and all great educational systems, right? In all systems where we have these foundational parts of the system, but it's the foundational parts that we're talking about. We're not talking about like, you must learn this thing. That's not the structure we're talking about. And we're also not talking about this thing is the best thing to learn. It's the only thing to learn, right? We're not talking about preferencing specific things or specific styles, for example, or specific kinds of music or whatever above other styles. That's not what we're talking about when we're talking about structure. Okay, so some of the features that should be in every lesson you teach, or some of the features that some of the aspects, some of the building blocks in terms of lessons. And again, this post from Simply Teach Better is more about classroom teaching, but there are, as I've said, there are lots of great things that can come out of our understanding around learning and teaching from classroom education, obviously, and that we can then apply in the studio. So some of these things: measurable objective, which sounds very like intense, right? Like this measurable objective, what? Engagement strategies. Also, these are very fancy words. Teacher modeling with student input. Ooh, that sounds fancy too. Prior knowledge activation. Sounds fancy. Big words. Independent practice with support. And differentiation. So in the voice studio, what this can look like is this can look like the fundamentals, the building blocks of the lesson are similar from lesson to lesson, and we have this building on knowledge and understanding, whether that is somatic or whether that is like in the brain, however we're working in the lesson, whatever kind of concepts we're working on. We have this building on the knowledge that builds in a way that is expected from lesson to lesson. Because then we have a way to understand what we're learning and to take that in and to like build on what we're learning. And I'm going to come back to some of those big words in a second. The issue often with voice teachers, and I work with a lot of new to voice teaching folks. I work with a lot of beginner voice teachers, especially in my voice pedagogy classes. The issue often that I see is that we're so afraid of like being boring, or we're so afraid of like not allowing or of there being space in the lesson, or we're so afraid of like maybe not giving them all of the information they need, or of maybe not like meeting every single need. Right, we're so afraid of having sort of space and time in the lesson, or like I said, of being boring, that we're chaotic. So we actually create this kind of chaotic system, overwhelming kind of lesson space or learning space that is not great for learning. It's not great for the brain, it's not great for learning. Why? Because the fundamentals aren't there. There isn't space to process, there isn't room to process, and the fundamentals of like the structure of the lesson are constantly changing, right? So I've got like the physical, sorry, not physical, the let's take some examples. So say in a lesson what we want to learn, or let's say in a lesson, sorry, I'm trying to just kind of parse out a little bit what I want to say here. It's been a day, so I haven't made notes. So you're welcome for this wild ride of through my brain where I haven't made notes. Coffee will help. We get a little bit, we get a little bit caught up in what we think are the fundamentals of the lesson, when really, so we tend to think, okay, the fundamentals in the lesson, the things that I have to teach here are, I've got to make sure they do warm-ups. I've got to make sure they do, I've got to make sure that they work on specific technical skills. I've got to make sure that they apply those technical skills in a song or in some kind of vocalese. And then I've got to make sure that they do some kind of like work on a specific song. Maybe they have to work on the characterization. Maybe they have to work on a technical skill in the song. Maybe they have to work on figuring out the notes in a song, or maybe they have to work on the rhythm in the song, or maybe they're still memorizing words or whatever. Like there are all these things that we have to work on, and we get mixed up. We get sort of caught up in thinking that those things are the fundamentals of the lesson, or those things are the fundamental things that we're teaching. Like what we're teaching is like how to have this agility, how to have this, how to have, breath management skills, how to, how to balance a sound, how to have this, how to learn a song, like all of those things. We get caught up in thinking, okay, those are the fundamentals of what we're teaching. But no, those aren't the fundamentals of what we're teaching, right? Those aren't the fundamentals. Those are like the output. Those are the objectives in some ways. Like that's the output of our teaching, that someone learns some kind of a new skill in singing, right? Like, or that they learn how to, I don't know, mix, or they learn how to belt, or they learn how to like, those aren't the fundamentals. That's the outcome of the teaching. The outcome is that we learn a thing, right? So those are the objectives. When we come back to these like specific features in the lessons we teach, yes. So those are the objectives. We get caught up in making sure that those things are in every single lesson, right? That we're learning this thing, we're learning this thing, we're learning this skill, we're doing this skill. And we kind of get caught up in making our goal to have this specific like learned thing happen in the lesson. But really, the fundamentals are working toward those objectives, right? The way that we teach is working toward those objectives, like working toward creating those outcomes. So the fundamentals then become, how do we engage with the student? And that specifically then and can be, what are the I mean, lots of the things that we've talked about previously in Facebook Lives, in live office hours, lots of the things that we've talked about previously in terms of scaffolding exercises, in terms of play in the lesson, in terms of having less speak, more sing in the lesson, right? We're talking specifically about voice lessons here, one-on-one voice lessons. All of these engagement strategies, that's a fundamental of your teaching. Teacher modeling with student input. Again, this is what we're talking about in voice lessons, consistently talking about in voice lessons, and what we have talked about is sorry, just looking to see here. Yeah. Okay, yeah. What we're talking about, where we're talking about engagement with, modeling and having like this play in the lesson and finding the structure, finding the fundamental around modeling and having this student give input, right? So we have this modeling plus input model. And again, this is where I talk about backward directives or back engineering directives, where like I model or I do the thing, I sing the thing, maybe 3 times, then you sing it back, maybe 3 times, small sections, and then we backward engineer, how did that feel or what changed for you? And then we backward engineer our directive from that. So now keep doing it in this way. Prior knowledge activation. This is where, and this is like, these are, like I said, these are big terms and big thoughts in our education system, but this is where we understand and acknowledge that the singer, and I'm taking this a little bit out of context from the education system, and putting it into voice, but this is where we understand and acknowledge that the singer, the student that we're working with, already knows how to sing. And what we're doing is we're just building on, right? So we find that prior knowledge, we find and we support the understanding that the singer already knows what they're doing. They already know how to sing. At a fundamental level, right? At a very an instinctive fundamental level, they already know how to do what they're doing. And now we support and build on what they're already doing. So we find the thing already that's there already, and we support and build on it. Independent practice with support. So this is once we've started to gather this information. This is also, we do this in the lesson all the time. So I've modeled. You're doing the thing, and then I step away from the modeling. You do the thing, and then I give any sort of like feedback as necessary, right? As necessary, if necessary. And in many cases, that feedback then becomes, what did you think? How did that work for you? What changed for you? That's what that feedback then becomes, right? Because we're engaging them to have autonomy and to have agency in their own voice. And then differentiation is this kind of like final piece in the education system where we're and again, applying this into the voice studio, where we're talking about differentiation or differentiated learning, which is where we draw on something we already know, and then we see this new thing or this other path that we're taking in our learning, and we compare. And differentiation doesn't mean that like this is good and this is bad. It just means that we compare and we say, oh, how is this different from the thing that I was doing before? So that we have this comparison to make the learning process deeper, right? We have this deeper understanding of what we just did because I'm comparing it to the thing that I just did, to the thing that I did before, or the way that I was doing it before, the coordination that I had before. So we have these fundamentals that are involved in the lesson. So students then, when they're coming into a lesson situation, when we're building our lesson structure and when we're working in the voice studio and we're building our lesson structure, yes, we may have exercises, warm-ups, exercises, warm-ups, a whole other thing, but let's say we have warm-ups, exercises, sight singing, ear training, what are all the things that we might do in a lesson? We work on this song, and this song, right? So yes, those may be all the things that we do in the lesson, but those aren't the fundamentals, right? The expectation around what I'm going to do in the lesson, yes, those can be that those structures can be there. Those structures can be there that the student knows that we're going to work on these specific things. But the things that we're actually that are actually fundamental and never changing from lesson to lesson are the fact that I'm engaging you in a specific way. I am modeling in a specific way. I am allowing for space in the lesson for you to do, for you to have some messy learning, if you will, to have some space to like figure stuff out. I am supporting your prior understanding, your prior knowledge activation. Excuse me, I'm supporting that always. I'm supporting the fact that you already have what it takes to do this thing within yourself. And we are going to find the coordination together for like this specific thing, but like you already know how to sing on some level, and we're gonna activate that, and that's the support that's there, right? That's always going to happen. You're always going to have the chance to do this thing on your own, and to have the support from me as well, and to have this like reflective time where I figure out what was different from the thing I did before. So the fundamental, and so when I'm thinking about all of those things, when I'm thinking about having space for learning, when I'm thinking about having how I'm engaging, how I'm giving preference and support to what you already know, and the ways that you already know how to sing, when I am when we're working together to understand that differentiation part, or how what I'm doing now is different from the way that I did it before. All of those, when I start to teach in that way, I start to talk a lot less in the lesson. I start to worry a lot less about whether or not that student is bored. I start to worry a lot less about whether or not I'm doing everything I can for the student, right? Because what I'm actually doing is I'm giving the student this agency in the lesson. I'm coming back to student-led learning, if you will. So I'm giving student the agency in the lesson, right? So then it means that as my understanding of how I'm teaching changes, and as my understanding of how I'm engaging, how I'm allowing for agency, student agency in the lesson. So as that starts to change, that changes how I teach. It changes, and it takes away that chaotic, like grasping for the next thing. Hopefully I got all the information in, making sure that I told you all of the things that I needed to tell you so that you could learn. And okay, we're going to go from this, we're going to do this exercise, then this exercise, then this exercise, then this exercise, like one right after the other, without pausing to reflect. As soon as we pause to reflect, you're going to need fewer and fewer exercises. I guarantee you will need fewer and fewer exercises, and you may even stop using warm-ups. Using warm-ups is a live for another day, but like, and the efficacy of warm-ups is alive for another day. But the more I start to have these things in place where I recognize that the product is the outcome and not the goal, and I've talked about this before too, process is the goal, not product, right? So the more I recognize that the product or the outcome is the product, and not the goal, the more my teaching changes, right? The way that I actually implement my teaching changes. Okay, so how does this work really specifically? Let me give you a couple of hands-on, like practical applications for this. Okay, so let's do a couple of practical applications. Let me just get over here. Yeah, right, good. Facebook is not showing me any comments, so I don't know whether there are comments there or not. If there are, I apologize. I don't see any, so I don't know. Maybe there aren't any comments, and that's fine too. Oh no, it says here 0 comments. Never mind, there are 0 comments. It's all good. It's fine. It's fine. So a couple of practical ways that this can play out in the lesson. For example, let me say this practically in terms of what I was just talking about in terms of exercises. So when I am working in a lesson and I'm working with a singer where I'm acknowledging what they already know, and I'm drawing on that, the understanding, and drawing on the and believing and supporting what's already there in their knowledge, what they can already do. When I am talking about, or when I am considering, let me just make sure I get the engagement strategies, and working with modeling, all of those things come together. And what do? I start to choose like one exercise to use without utilizing more of. Oh yeah, Nicholas, that's a good question. Um, let me I'm gonna save that one for a whole other live. I'll put that in, possibly even on Friday. I'll do it on Friday. Talk about warm-ups. Yeah. Uh, it's a good question. Um, so then what I'm doing then is I am, oh gosh, I got squirreled there a little bit. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So when I'm taking into consideration those things, when I bring, yeah, when I come into the lesson with an exercise, for example, and I say, let's start with blah blah blah, whatever lesson, say a scale, I don't know, or maybe a 1 3 5 8 5 3 1 kind of exercise. As we're moving through that exercise, I'm modeling first, and then the singer is doing the thing, and I'm modeling and singing and modeling and singing, and we're having a conversation there about, yeah, so what else needs to, where do you want to go with this? What isn't working for you so well? What do you think is working really well for you? We're having this kind of conversation around this exercise. And then we can build within that exercise. So the next exercise that I do isn't going to be like a total change of pace, right? So isn't going to be like, okay, good, we're done that exercise now. Now let's do I don't know, scales, or mio gentile amore, right? The good old favorite, like classical one. Or let's do a scale now. Because if I am truly engaging with that first exercise, and with all of the, with all of those fundamentals that we were talking about earlier with that first exercise, when I do need to move to another exercise, it's going to be joined to the first exercise. It's going to build on what we did in that first exercise. It's not going to be a completely different exercise where we're working on a totally different skill necessarily. I mean, it might be, but it's likely not going to be, right? I'm going to have this building of skills, this scaffolding, I call it scaffolding, but we're going to have a building of skills and a building on what I already did in the lesson. Again, this is one of the things that I see often happening, is that, like, I've got this set of exercises. I've got like 5 exercises that I use with all of the students that I work with, and everybody does it, and we all do it in the same way. And like, and the next week I work on another 5. Well, that's fine. Have 5 exercises. I don't care. Have 5 exercises, but be in the moment with the student and understand and have a dialogue around that exercise, and then let the next exercise come out of that first exercise, or be building on whatever we did in that first exercise. So that's an example of how that kind of changes. And you can see that if we're in lessons where if we're teaching and you're in a lesson where the first exercise, second, third exercise, fourth exercise, all of the singing that you're doing is not building or not joined to the last thing, my brain is still on the last exercise that I did and still trying to figure out what I did right or what I didn't do well in that last exercise. And now you're giving me something brand new that I have to figure out again. That's chaotic for my brain. It doesn't encourage deeper learning. It's not a great way to learn. That's chaotic in my brain, right? So, and another example that I have of this is, like, I'm sure many of you have had this experience where you have a really, you have some really great information and some learning things that happen, some really great learning happens in a lesson, and you go home and you work on that, and then you're working on, blah, blah, blah. And then the lesson, you go to your next lesson and then you work on something completely different. And the whole time in your next lesson, you're like, but I really needed to solidify and understand the thing that I was doing in my last lesson that I've been working on this whole week. And I really need you to see, like, I really need to have a conversation about what I did in my last lesson and what I've been working on this whole week. And now we're working on something completely different. I don't know what happened in the last lesson. Like, I don't know whether, whether I've been able to solidify what happened in the last lesson. Now, there may be a reason sometimes for, working on something completely different. Obviously, there's lots of different reasons to do that, but that's an example of how when we are not keeping the fundamentals the same, engaging with the student, having this having conversation with the student, having, like, when we're not keeping those things the same, how it becomes chaotic for the student. It's not great learning. Someone on Instagram, the magician, the soprano. Nothing was a bigger disappointment than when I went to a big name teacher and she said, I do these exercises with all of my students. The exercise had little to do with the concerns I had. Yeah. So, and let me be perfectly honest here. I do, like, basically the same melodic exercise with everybody. Like, I almost always do the same melodic exercise. Like, I don't care, because for me it's not about the melody, right? It's not about the tune. I don't care about the tune. I have specific tunes that I use for, like, specific things. If we're working on agility, then we might use a different melody or exercise than we might if we're working on blending or something. I don't know, whatever. But it's not about, so it's not about, like, it's not about how well the exercise works. It's about what the communication is with the singer or the student, right? So it's fine if you use the same, like, 5 exercises with every single student that you work with. That's fine. So long as those exercises are then, so long as you're in communication with the singer, right? So long as those fundamentals are in place around the exercise. That's what's going to change, right? Yeah, exactly. Oh, I know. You use 1, 3, 1. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I use a 1, 3, 5, 8, 5, 3, 1, like, constantly. It's like my favorite one. Or sliding fifths. I love sliding fifths. So I use sliding fifths all the time. Those are, like, favorite exercises. But there's we're using, and I have specific exercises I use for specific things, for sure. But I'm not using them because the exercise is so good, right? It's not the exercise that's so good. I mean, it's useful, but it's not the exercise is so good. And that one exercise, just doing that exercise is not going to be the thing that works for every single singer, right? Like, that's not the thing that's making the exercise work. The thing that's making the exercise work is how I engage, what those other fundamentals are. So let me just come back to those again. Measurable objective, meaning more along the lines of, like, I think in the voice studio, the measurable objective is what we have in the back of our minds for specific coordinations for tonal outcome for communication. So are there measurable objectives in the voice studio? Yes, there are ways to put measurable objectives into the voice studio. Yeah, sliding fifths, right? Blah. Are there ways to put measurable objectives into the voice studio? Yes, they can be challenging. And so often when we use measurable objectives especially in music training, we so often kind of fall into, like, well, can you sing 2 octaves? Like, do you have an accessible 2 octaves? Like, or whatever, right? We find these measurable objectives, but, like, singing is an art as much as it is a science, right? Like, in fact, it's more an art than it is a science. So, like, what kind of measurable objectives are we going to put on this art? So for me, that's a little bit challenging in the voice studio, but engagement strategies, teacher modeling with student input, prior knowledge activation, that's such a big one in the voice studio. How many singers do you know who have gone to voice teachers where the voice teacher has to, like, I've got to tear down your technique in order to build it up again. It's very old school European to be like, I've got to tear down your technique to build it up again. Everything you've learned up till now is wrong. Or, students who've never sung before coming into a voice studio where they're told that they don't know how to sing, right? And so, or their own thought about the fact that they don't know how to sing is supported by the voice teacher, No, that's not a thing. We're going to do prior knowledge activation, meaning we're going to we're going to say you already know. Can you talk? You already know how to use your breath to make your vocal folds work. So let's do this thing. Independent practice with support. In other words, working on the thing and then. Oh, Zach, that's amazing. I love it. Zach Tack 467 says, currently in my senior year as an undergrad, vocal performance major and vocal ped prof told us about your Instagram. That's so great. So cool. Who's your prof? I'll get a little shout out to them. And then independent practice with support and then differentiation. Like I said, understanding what was the thing. Oh, yeah. Yeah, grad school prof did that and destroyed your self-confidence and technique. Yeah, absolutely. I know so many people that has happened to, especially in our Western classical society, right? Where you go to the big name teacher or you go to the teacher and out of their own insecurity and or out of their own, that's the way that they were taught, right? That's the way that they were taught. And so they were taught that in order to have good technique, you had to be torn down first, like you had to take apart your technique first, and then you have to build it up. That's just full on bullshit, and it's damaging and dangerous, and really makes me angry. Makes me very angry. So that's one of the great things that I love about that. Prior knowledge activation. And again, in our education circles, in our classrooms, it's a slightly different focus, but yeah. Didn't destroy my technique. Oh, just my self-esteem. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Does that. Yeah, lots of times. Lots of times. That is the thing. We've got some terrific performers with not a lot of pedagogical understanding. And we all are. We're all teaching the way that we were taught. That's the whole thing, right? That's the whole thing. We all come in here and we teach the way we were taught, and we teach from our belief system, and we teach from that's the way we do. That's how we work. But we can change that. So that's the thing for today. Consider some of these. What are you considering the fundamentals in the lesson, right? Consider some of those deeper fundamentals and what are the actual fundamentals versus outcomes. Again, this comes back to process versus product. Totally comes back to process versus product. So, okay, have a great week. I will see you on the socials, probably or not. I don't know. If you're not on my mailing list, please do get on there. If you're not already on there, weekly emails with all the voice ped you can handle. Lots of things that I don't share on social media often, jumps into the weekly emails if you're into that. Terrific. Have a great day and a great week. Boop. Ending.